Good evening, sir. Good evening, Paul. Great to be back on the show with you again, matey.
It's always a pleasure, Mr. Gary Thacker. For those that don't know, author, podcaster, historian, journalist. The list is as long as my shopping list, Gary. We have done a couple of podcasts before with a number of your books. The first one was about the Dutch, I would say, revolution. Beautiful bridesmaids dressed in orange, and I love the way that you've put the orange in the Dutch writing. So first and foremostly, tell the listeners all about Gary Thacker, how you got involved in the writing process and your journey from Warsaw, which is not too far away from where I'm in Berkeley Green, Birmingham.
Yeah, indeed. Well, I guess, I suppose like everybody, you dabbled in sort of things. And I guess when it started, well, I was about, I suppose, 50-ish. And I started working, running a design agency in Birmingham. Where we used to do campaigns for NHS, predominantly about sort of smoking cessation, health promotion stuff. And I started writing a bit of copy for leaflets and that sort of thing. And I got into blogging that way. Did a few blogs. Got interested in got approached by a couple of decent blogging sites who said, want to come and sort of write for us. And yeah, that came on. And then I talked to a couple of guys who'd written a book. So I thought, I could try that. And I wrote the first one, and I self-published on Amazon, which is a bit of a sort of an easy way into writing. Then after that, I got sort of it's like writing books, Paul, is a bit like a drug.
Yeah.
It's you hate it, but you can't stop it once you've done it. And, I mean, this one I'm talking about now is it's been my seventh one, and I've written a couple of novels. But you mentioned about the Dutch one. Before that, I wrote one about England, the World Cup, history of England, the World Cup. It took me about 3 years to write. But it's really weird that if I should have started writing earlier. I'm on now, so 20 days. I'll be 67 this year, so I've got one more book which I've just pretty well finished, and then that's me retiring. But that'll be 8. That's plenty, I think. So, but yeah, the Dutch one is probably my favourite one to date. But this one picks up the thread of that because the British Bridesmaids was about the British national team. And this is the book we're going to talk about today. Dutch Masters is about the Ajax team that won the successive European Cups 71, 72, 73, and which the team obviously fed into the Dutch national team. But yeah, so after that, I sort of come to sort of semi-retirement. I came out to live in Spain. Had a big house where the kids have gone. There was me and the wife. We had 3 bathrooms, and the 2 of us there and a cat. So I had to sort of cash in on that and move out to Spain and have our sort of salad days and a bit of sunshine, buddy.
Fabulous. But you can't retire. I mean, you're at the young age, the tender age of 67. You are a Chelsea supporter. You fell in love with Chelsea during the mid-late 60s, early 70s. I have to say my podcast partner, Alan Hudson, tells me so many stories about those Chelsea years, and Chelsea are a team that is close to my heart. Not the modern-day Chelsea, but those Chelsea boys. Yeah. And let's start, because we're going to be talking about the Dutch Masters. Now, Holland was pretty much an amateur in the game of association football. They didn't become professional. The Arrivederci didn't start, I believe it was mid-50s, and Ajax wasn't professional pretty much until Rinus Michels took the helm there.
Yeah, I think Ajax's first professional player was Piet Keizer, which I think was 62, 63, and Cruyff was the second one. As you say, Dutch football was amateur in both performance and outlook for many, many years. And Vic Buckingham, who used to manage the Baggies, of course, at one stage, he actually got them qualified for their first European Cup when they won the Dutch Eredivisie in the 50s, 59, I think it was. And they got hammered by an amateur team. And that was the standard of Dutch football. In fact, sort of looking at Dutch football as a whole, they played in the 1934 and 38 World Cup. and didn't play a game in the World Cup until they qualified for the 1974 tournament. And before they qualified for 1974, they hadn't won a single World Cup game. I mean, that was the standard. It's crazy, you know. They sort of got the final in 74, got the final in 78, and then didn't qualify again for another 12 years. Absolutely crazy. But, you know, Ajax and Feyenoord sort of came through as the clubs in the early 60s. You say Mikkels take over from Big Booking actually, and Ajax was struggling at the time. They weren't bottom, but they were sort of near towards the bottom of the Eredivisie. And Mikkels won the first game. I think it's 9-3. There was about 7 or 8 games left when he took over, and the only thing he won 2 or 3 more, but he kept them up, and they gave him the job full time. And you know, as I say, the rest is history. But yeah, Dutch football until the Mikkels era was very much amateurish. As I say, not only is defined as amateurish because I mean, just it's out of it. Even when Pete Kaiser had his first professional contract, he actually owned a tobacconist shop as well, which he had to run to eke out his earnings. Cruyff, when he got his first professional contract, he had to, I can't remember the name of the magazine, but he worked part-time for this sports magazine and even stood on street corners selling these magazines as a professional footballer. Even as a pro, they weren't paid enough for it to work, and until Mikkels came in and tried to professionalise rather than sort of, in technical terms, put a sheen on it, so the club could develop.
He really did take the bull by the horns, didn't he, Michaels? He really transformed Ajax. I remember watching a documentary, and there was Kaiser, there was Mr. Ajax. Please don't let me forget about him, because he's always the forgotten man, isn't he? You could go... sorry?
Shock Spart was his called Mr. Ajax. It was
exactly, yeah.
He was there. Yeah, it was there when Mikkels he was still there in the early 70s. But yeah, I mean, they did. It's interesting because they took the bull by the horns. They used to call Mikkels the Bull because he was so dominating. And there's a part I've got in the book. There's a guy called Bobby Harms who played, because Mikkels used to play for Ajax as well.
Yes, he did. He was Bobby a forward, wasn't he, Mikkels? And he won 2 leagues with. Yeah. Correct.
Mm-hmm. I think he scored in his debut. I think he scored something like 4 or 5 goals in his debut.
5 on his debut. Yeah, 5 on his debut.
Yeah, he was a big, strong centre forward, not particularly skilled, but sort of physical. And Bobby Harms tells a story that when he was a player, he was very sort of happy-go-lucky, joker. As a coach, totally different, disciplinarian, and lots of the Ajax players. I mean, when he first went there, he said, this is the days of, taking it easy, just crawling through training. They're gone. You'll be training properly. You're going to go to training twice a day at times, cross country, and just sort of really set the discipline in there. And he said to a lot of people, said to players, if you don't like it, you can ship out. That's the way it's going to be. Yeah. And a lot of players at Ajax, even despite the success, didn't get on with Mikkels. I mean, you mentioned Pete Kaiser. Pete Kaiser particularly had a really, I won't say a love-hate, it's more like a hate-hate relationship. And when Mikkels left after the first European Cup triumphs in 71, Kaiser apparently jumped onto, when he was told, he jumped onto the table and danced on the table. That's how much he didn't get on with Mikkels. But yeah, you're absolutely right. He did take the ball by the horns and shake the club up and down until it was fit for purpose.
Because Chelsea played Ajax in 1917, July 1917, as a friendly. It was just after Chelsea had won the FA Cup. Alan was injured. He didn't play a part in the final or the replay or Mexico. But pretty much his first game back for Chelsea, they'd gone to Sweden. And Alan said to me, we dropped off in Amsterdam to play this friendly because back in those days, you get some easy games in Sweden. So we dropped off in Ajax. We discovered Heineken, the red light district, and this football club that was named after a cleaning product and a fella that wore the number 14 shirt. Chelsea didn't really know much about Ajax. Neither did the world, because it was a different world back then, of course.
It was, mate. I mean, there ain't many British players who could have played for Ajax. Hoodie's one of them. This guy was good enough, absolutely good enough to play for almost any club in the world. But yeah, as you said, they were really unknown, and I think that the first time they even sort of made a ripple in English football was when they played Liverpool in 66, 67 season, I think it was, and I think they beat Liverpool something like 6-1.
5-1.
And 5-1 was it?
2-2 at Anfield.
That's right. And Shankly said, the play, I've got the quote in the book, something along the lines of, we're not used to playing against a team who plays so defensively, but we'll score 6 against them in Anfield. Well, they didn't. I mean, Cruyff scored 2, and I think Mudge Hunt scored a couple of goals as well. But I mean, that was when they made the announcement of the first Liverpool. But as you say, as what he says there, even in 70, they were still. I mean, Netherlands football on the club scene, the European club scene, was sort of very subdued. I mean, it was a bit of a backwater.
What was the rivalry like between Feyenoord and Ajax? Because, of course, Ajax got to the final in 69. Feyenoord won the European Cup in 70, and then Ajax won it 71, 72, 73. But when Ajax qualified in 72, it was Feyenoord that took the Arrivederci, and Ajax went into there as defending champions because, of course, in those days, you either had to win your domestic league or win the European Cup to get into the European Cup. Very different today in the Champions League. It isn't really the Champions League because there are champions, but often the winner of the Champions League isn't the champion of the respective country or defending champions of the European Cup. So it was a different dynamic back then, but that Feyenoord and Ajax rivalry was intense, wasn't it?
It wasn't just, mate. Wasn't it just, as you say? There's just an interesting thing. I mean, I was fortunate to have some fantastic interviews for the book. One of the guys I spoke to was Ruud Krol. Absolute legend. What a nice guy. I mean, I must have chatted to him for half an hour, 3/4 an hour, and he told me about one of the things I asked him about was the rival with Feyenoord, and there's a lot of the Dutch press when Feyenoord won the European Cup, beating Celtic. Beating Inter. Yeah. Forgive me. No, sorry. Feyenoord beat Celtic. Celtic beat Inter. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The Feyenoord won it. And it doesn't matter who it is. It's a Dutch club won. Ruud Krol said, no, that's not how they looked at it today. They were sort of really jealous. It should have been them first. And in 1970, when they qualified for the final to play, 71, played Panathinaikos at Wembley, about 5 days before the last league game of the season, and Ajax were 1 point in front of Feyenoord, and it was a real. They were playing in Rotterdam, Feyenoord Stadium, the keep in Rotterdam, and it was torrential rain, and the pitch was a right sort of mess. And Feyenoord, it was their last game of the season. Didn't really matter. Ajax players that got the European Cup final coming up 3 or 4 days later. So the approach from the Feyenoord players was pretty robust and sort of understanding and appreciating that the Ajax players ain't going to risk an injury and potentially miss the European Cup. And that's exactly how it panned out. And that rival was there again. And Feyenoord won that game and won the title because Ajax had won the Cup a little earlier and then went on to win the European Cup. So that denied them the treble, as it were. The rival was intense. And obviously Happel and Mikkels were sort of sparring off against each other tactically. People, where does total football come from? I've got a sort of couple of sections in it he invented as to what is it, he defined it. I've spoken to lots of different people about it, former players. I spoke to Ruud Krol and mentioned David Winner, who got Brilliant Orange, Sonny Saloy, who played for Ajax for a good many years. I spoke to Johnny Rep for a quick brief chat with Johnny Rep, and a couple of other pros, a couple of authors, journalists in the Netherlands. And there's no real easy answer to what is total football. But Mikkels, the way he approached it, the game, he sort of adapted because of the way Happel's team were. Mikkels was playing a 4-2-4 as opposed to this is in 1970 when we were playing won the European Cup. Towards the end of the season, before a couple of games before the European Cup, Feyenoord were playing Ajax, and Feyenoord Apple was playing 4-3-3. And it sort of overwhelmed them. And after that game, that Mikkels realised if Tottenham was going to work, he had to adapt his formation. And he went out and bought and signed Johan Neeskens for that extra midfield presence. And that's, that was the sort of the birth of the first Ajax legend.
And Arnold Muren's older brother played, didn't he, Jerry? And that is the reason why Johan Cruyff wore the number 14 shirt, because he was injured, wasn't he, Johan? And all the numbers were given, and whether it's true or not, I don't know. I don't know if you got to the bottom of it, but he picked a shirt out of the kit bag and it got number 14, and Cruyff carried on wearing that, and Jerry Muren wore the number 9 shirt.
You're absolutely right, mate, and it was, and it is true. I've spoken to a guy called Ork Koch, who's a Dutch journalist and writer. He wrote Cruyff's biography. I asked him about it. He said, "Yeah, it is definitely true." Mm-hmm. He's had it from a couple of players. That, as you say, Cruyff was out injured, and he had worn 9 before his injury. And when he was injured, Jerry Muren took over his shirt, and I think he's had for about 7 or 8 games, a fairly long absence. Yeah. And he came back, and Muren wanted to give him the 9 shirt back. And he said, no, you've been playing, you wear it. And he dipped his hand into a pile of shirts, and chance would have it that he pulled out number 14. As you say, I know when I was sort of researching this, I wanted it to be true. So it was great to talk to Ork, who's a cracking guy, a really nice guy to speak to, and so knowledgeable about Ajax and Dutch football. And he said, I've had it confirmed by first hand it's true. What a great story. But it's interesting about Jerry Muren, just sort of briefly, and when they played Real in the semi-final, I think it was 73, there's a passage of play. Ajax had won 1-0, 2-1, I think it was, in Amsterdam, and everybody thought it was going to be a real difficult game now to go to Madrid with just a single goal lead. And they played really well, went 1-0 up, and there was a passage to play with about 10-15 minutes to play. And, sometimes you needed goals to confirm the game, to confirm that you've won. But this wasn't a goal. It was a cross-field pass from the right from Serbia across to the left-hand side where Muren was playing left-hand side of midfield. And he cushioned the ball, and he jogged forward, really keep up it, left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. It's magnificent. And then he just trots the ball off to Ruud Krol. And I've got his quoting, and he says that, in that moment, it was no longer the big Real Madrid and little Ajax. Ajax had stepped up and became the better team, the better club, and more important.
And I guess for some of the older listeners, if you remember Jim Baxter, what he done at Wembley, that was pretty much the situation. So, the little Ajax became the big Ajax. And by winning games in Europe, that's what you believe, and that confidence that Ajax took onto. Lots of people would say with the Dutch, there's an arrogance with the Dutch. I believe it's a supreme confidence, and that comes with winning so many games, so many important games, and that team that I think it just encapsulated absolutely everything. His name, Jerry, I don't know. I looked on Wikipedia, and sometimes Wikipedia, there are things on there that aren't particularly true. But he's got Hyacinth and Maria in his name. Is that true?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
How did that come about?
I think it means different things in different languages. I think Ruud Krol's middle name is something like Maria or something like that as well. I wouldn't say, but it is, it is true, yeah. It's full name, it is quite long. And there's this thing that in Netherlands culture that a lot of, whether you're boys or girls, your mother's name becomes part of your sort of group of names. But it's just about arrogance. I was, not for this book actually, although I did speak for this book, but about The Beautiful Bridesmaid, I was talking to a guy called Jan Herman de Bruyne, who's quite elderly now, but sort of massively respected journalist in the Netherlands. And he says, there is nothing in life more arrogant than a Dutchman. I mean, I didn't argue. I mean, he said, this guy is that, and he knows it. But it's a feature of Dutch football that's sort of the swagger. I mean, there's a journalist, Ajax expert. He works for a newspaper called Patal. His name Menno Pot, and he runs a podcast about Ajax, and it's in Dutch called Browne, which means swagger.
Yeah. But, the Dutch earned that right to have that swagger because that's how they played the game of football. 1971, they won their first European Cup at Wembley. And it was Dick Van Dijk that scored the goal, wasn't it? It was like, musical.
It was. Mary Poppins wasn't there, no, Dick.
No, I mean, you couldn't make it up, could you? And the first goal scorer at Wembley, Dick Van Dijk, you're thinking, blimey, here we go.
Yeah, you're right. It was quite early in the game as well. Yeah. Barry Hulshoff, who's probably one of my favourite players of all time, was playing centre back. And this guy played centre back, and he only played 13 games for the Dutch national team. He had a bad knee injury, which finished his career. He was only about 27, 28 at the time, just about reaching his peak. He played 13 games for the Dutch national team and scored 6 goals from centre back.
Yeah.
I mean, this is how good this guy was. But he strode forward and played a pass, 50, 60-yard pinpoint pass to Kaiser out on the left. Kaiser passed the full-back and crossed it in, and Van Dijk ran to the near post and flicked into the far post.
Yeah.
I mean, a really good goal.
Yeah,
and people say that Panathinaikos in that game, that it's only a Greek team, they were, but special. They beat Everton to get into the thing, and they beat Red Star Belgrade, and they'd lost something like 4-1 in Belgrade, and then beat them 3-0 at home to go through an away goals. I mean, they were coached by Ferenc Puskas.
Yes. Yeah.
But I mean, any team that gets to a European Cup final is there because they deserve it. As you said earlier, Paul, these are the times when you get 4 teams qualifying from one country. You've got to win your title.
Yeah.
You've got to be the best team to get there anyway. So, I mean, people sort of say that's the easy one. It wasn't the easy one. I mean, and Panathinaikos played quite decent football in that game. I spoke to a couple of Greek journalists about it. One guy who wrote a book about when Greece won the European Cup and the European Championship. And, that Panathinaikos, that team was revered even today in Greece as the greatest ever Greek club team.
And when you look at 69 and Ajax getting beat by AC Milan, because Rinus Michels was all about attack, and rightly so, and the whole of Dutch football, as we've seen, the success of Dutch football is based on that philosophy. But he realised then, in that final, when they got beat, that I need to really focus on my defence as well as my attack.
Yeah.
It's no good just going all guns blazing. I need to, like with the Italians, with the Catenaccio, and in 72, that's who they played, the major exponents of the Catenaccio International. But he formulated a system that was based on pretty much, I'm guessing, what the Catenaccio was all about. It wasn't about making sure that you're a defensive unit, but making sure that back door is locked. And that's what Michael's done, and that was the bedrock of his success, 71, 72, 73, wasn't it?
Yeah. It's a really fascinating game. I mean, there's a quote from Barry Hulshoff, who mentioned earlier. He said that, we were too young, we were too inexperienced, but sometimes you have to lose a final to win a final.
Yep.
And I can't remember the exact quote. There's a Dutch quote, something along the lines of, you only learn through experience, or something like that. And as you say, Michels picked up on that, and he signed Vasovic, who played the European Cup final a couple of years previously and lost. And he became the sort of first sweeper of in the total football system, and he was the first Dutch captain to pick up the European Cup. He captained the side against Panathinaikos, and as you say, it's you get beat sometimes, but sometimes you learn more from your defeats than you do from your victories. And that was, as you say, Paul, that was certainly the case in when they lost to Milan, because Milan were a far superior side. They were proper case hardened. They were hard. They were used to winning. They were skilled in Serie A. I think I can't remember exactly, but they conceded some ridiculous low amounts of goals on their way to win the Serie A title, the Scudetto. They were just basically too good. They were too experienced, too strong. But I actually learned from it. Michaels looked. I spoke to Ruud Krol. He said at the end of every season, Michaels would look at his team and his squad, and if there's players who weren't good enough, they were out. Now, don't how big your name was, they were out, and he'd look out for somebody. He'd look for the right piece that fitted in the jigsaw.
And that international team, it was governed by the great Sandro Mazzola, whose father was the great Valentino Mazzola, who was a player, the pin-up boy, the poster boy in the El Grande Torino side, and the Inter was the El Grande Inter. It was an extremely phenomenal Inter team. However, they were looking at their past glories rather than, I guess if you're looking at a supermarket, they're past their sell-by dates, really. They were on the wrong end, wasn't they, International in 72, but steeped in European Cup glory.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking 72 final now with the big Inter. You're right. And there's one of the guys who I spoke to, the journalist there, who had an interview. I can't remember the guy's name, the Internazionale defender, who was given the onerous task of marking Cruyff.
Good luck
with that. I mean, good luck with that, indeed, mate. There you go. No sweat, kiddo. Help yourself. Fill your boots, Tiger. And apparently he studied for weeks and looking up at types of Cruyff and his manoeuvres and how he played. And for the first one, it's 15 minutes, 20 minutes. He sort of kept it quiet, but then, it broke free. There's a phrase, something along the lines of, when there's a saucepan boiling, you put the top on the saucepan, but eventually your fingers get burned. And that's what happened. And there's great passage in that game, and it's missed by so many. And I didn't know until I watched the game, obviously, again for the book. You're recalling 74 World Cup against Sweden, Cruyff, the Cruyff turn.
Yeah,
he actually did it in that game as well in 1972 against Inter, and it sort of got missed, I suppose, because there wasn't the World Cup, the global coverage that wasn't the World Cup. But it was probably their best performance, I think, in Inter, because Inter were, as you say, they were a little bit over the top, but they were the proper old masters, and it was a real sort of attacking team against defensive team, and it's great for football that Ajax come out on top, because we all like attacking football, don't we, mate?
Absolutely. But when when we're talking about these crack sides, and they are phenomenal sides, and it's the reputation that precedes. I remember when Chelsea beat Real Madrid in Athens in 1971, and Alan was saying to me, it's still Real Madrid. And Hento played in that game. It's probably one of his final games that he played. He was a substitute in one game. He still got his watch on. And Johnny Boyle had his shirt, and he had a few drinks one night, and he got rid of it in Tampa Bay. But and Uddy says you don't do things like that, Johnny. You're in the presence of greatness, and that's what they were. But that first goal with Cruyff, the ball had come over the goalkeeper and the centre half, and Cruyff had got it, and he just off balance, and he knocked it in, and he reeled away. That was arguably the first time I watched a game of football and thought, blimey, why didn't that fella fall over?
Yeah, it's it's one of these things you look at, you think I should tap in that is, but the balance, I say to get your sort of composure and score from it, But that's great players make things look simple, don't they, mate? Over the years, you look at players sometimes you think, it's not too bad. Then when you analyse, you think, there's something special there, and there's quote us that, and it might be difficult things look easy. And it's interesting, there's both goals, although they played really some great football in that game against Inter, both goals came from crosses. The one that you say when the goalkeeper and the centre half sort of collided and let the ball go through to Cruyff, and the second one was I think header from a corner.
It was, flicked on header.
So there was, although the total football sort of created domination of the game, both goals came from sort of, pretty much bread and butter crosses into the box.
But again, then 72, so they've won it, and they won everything in 1972. They went through the whole. Did they even beat Rangers? That would have been 73, of course. but it was the follow-on from winning the European Cup. They played the Super Cup and won that. So, Ajax over that period of time have won the Dutch League, they've won the Dutch Cup, they've won the European Cup, they've won the Super Cup. I mean, they've won absolutely everything that they could possibly play for, apart from the World Cup. And then when it did come to the World Cup, of course, it was pretty much the bedrock was the Dutch team plus Van Hanegem and one or two others, and Rinus Michels took over. And it was only a few weeks going up to the World Cup that Rinus took over, and then your centre halves are missing. He stuck Ariane at centre half, and that's what when players are missing in this country, we go, oh my God, we've got a centre half missing. What we're going to do? The Dutch centre half missing, put a centre midfield in. Dutch centre forwards missing, put a centre midfield up front. But that's the way that they would always encourage to play, and total football just come to the fore in both club football and international football. A shame that they didn't win. A shame that they were bridesmaids in 74 and 78, but they certainly were the groom they were the bride and the groom in the 70s, the early 70s in club football.
Dead right, mate, yeah. It's interesting about the Rangers game because it was designed to be the first Super Cup. Yeah. However, it wasn't, because Rangers had won the Cup Winners' Cup, I think. Was the Cup Winners' Cup?
Yeah, they won the Cup Winners' Cup, Rangers did.
But because of there'd been some fan violence in the final,
yes, the
UEFA had banned Rangers from playing any European games for a season. So they couldn't officially play. So the game was actually played to celebrate Rangers' centenary. Right. Although, absolutely. Although the idea was sort of, when it was floated with UEFA, that's a decent idea, but we can't do that because Rangers were actually banned. So it was a celebration of Rangers' centenary. Actually, that's the cover they used, although it was the first unofficial Super Cup. But yeah, you mentioned about sort of Ajax leading into the European, into the World Cup squad at Michels. Because Michels left after 71, to go to Barcelona. And it was taken over by a guy called Stefan Kovacs, who was a Romanian, fairly unknown coach. And Kovacs was different in so many ways to Michels, and he sort of let the handbrake off a little bit and allowed the players to sort of express themselves more. And that became a better team. In fact, there's a famous quote that Cruyff made, it's in Jonathan Wilson's book about Inverting the Pyramid, saying that Ajax played better football under Michels, under Kovacs than he did under Michels. And so when the World Cup came round in 74, the team that Rinus Michels had, the players from Ajax, were actually a much more developed team than the team he left. So Michels' time at Barcelona had allowed Kovacs to play with better players. But you mentioned about Ariane as well going there. You're absolutely right, mate. Absolutely right. So there was two players that were injured that couldn't play in the 90s, and couldn't play fully. But one was Barry Hulshoff, who had an injury to his knee and basically finished him. And the other guy was Rinus Israel, that played for Feyenoord. And Michels took Rinus Israel, and he came with us a couple of times, but he couldn't play all the time. So they're stuck with a situation there about the defence, and the goalkeeper was another fascinating thing. There was Jan van Beveren was by far and away the best goalkeeper in the Netherlands, probably the best in Europe at the time. And he had an injury a couple of months before the World Cup squad was announced, and he came back afterwards. Pete Schrijvers from Ajax took his place in the national squad, and when he came back, he was sort of semi-fit to the tournaments. And Michels said, "I want you to prove your fitness in a friendly game." I think it was against Hanover. This is a few weeks before the World Cup. And Jan van Beveren said to Michels, "I don't really want to risk damaging the injury. If you want me to play a half, I'll play half." And in the end, the coach said, "Well, no, if you're not going to play, then you clear off." And they kicked him out of the squad. And I actually, the Netherlands was faced with the situation of their goalkeeper, who was probably, I say, the best goalkeeper in the Netherlands by a country mile. Everybody thought Pete Schrijvers was going to be the guy who had put between the sticks, but no, this is Dutch football. So instead, they picked a player who hadn't played international football for 12 years, and in that time, in that time, he'd just played 5 minutes in his first cap. He'd come on as a substitute and conceded a goal. He hadn't played for 12 years in international football. This is Jan Youngblood, who the Dutch then put into the squad. And Harry Hahn, as you say, because Nichols couldn't pick Horsov and pick Rennes Israel, he picked a midfield player to play centre half, and alongside him, he picked the Feyenoord fullback, Wim Roysbergen, to play alongside him. So you had a goalkeeper who hadn't played international football for 12 years. You had Harry Hahn, who was a midfield player, played centre back and never played there in his life before. And he had a Wim Roysbergen, who was his first cap. I think he got one cap for going into the tournament, playing centre half, who was a fullback. This is Dutch football for you, mate.
And Jan Youngblood was the first goalkeeper I've ever seen head a ball. I mean,
yes.
It was almost like, when in modern days now we go, the goalkeeper needs to be able to kick the ball out and he's the sweeper keeper. Well, Jan Youngblood was in 1974. He was a sweeper keeper. So in all positions in that Dutch, and I'm guessing that Michaels picked him for his ability, with his feet as much as with his hands.
Absolutely right. That's absolutely correct.
He
did. I think it was Cruyff actually who pushed for him. And it's interesting though. I mean, I've watched the World Cup, all the Dutch games from my previous book, and in the entire tournament, he only comes out of his area once, because this is before the pass back. Because the ball roll back, he can pick it up. He only comes out of his area once. And you think, okay, what's he going to do? He's going to sort of throw a body swerve. He's going to sort of step over and load it. No, he just hoops the ball off the park. Even I could have done that. But there you go. I mean, as I say, but you're right. He did pick him because he was deemed to be a footballing goalkeeper. You're absolutely right, mate.
In the 1973 European Cup final, again against another Italian opposition, Juventus, and it was Johnny Rep. I didn't realise that Johnny come into the team later. I thought all these boys come at the same time, but they didn't. Kroll come in almost as the missing piece of the jigsaw, and then Johnny Rep come in the 1973 final. Michaels had already gone, and Barcelona hadn't won. I don't think they'd won the league for something like 10 seasons and won the league there at Barcelona. So he's plying his trade there in Spain. The Dutch are still plying their trade all over Europe and conquering Europe. And it was a Johnny Rep goal that won the third of the trilogy, the trio, the European Cups back to back. But in 72, let's just go back to 72. If you're going to win a European Cup anywhere on the planet, well, it's going to obviously be in Europe. You want to win it in your neighbour's backyard, really, to take the piss, don't you? And that's what the Dutch done with Feyenoord.
You're right, mate. There, it's interesting. Ajax played 3 games in about 3 weeks after the Kuip towards the end of the season. They played the KNVB Cup final at the Kuip and won it. They played Feyenoord a couple of weeks before the end of the season in the league game after the Kuip and won it, and won the league because of that. And then had the European Cup final there and won that bugger there as well. So as you say, talking about taking the mick, that did it once. They did 3 times.
But again, that was what they were all about, and they were a fun football team, wasn't they? They were everything that you want from a football team. I remember even when I was starting a football team, I wanted that Ajax sign. They just stood for everything that football should stand for. Where did your love of Dutch football come from, Gary? What did you start thinking about? I'm going to start researching Dutch football and write these 2 iconic books. I also want to know where the cover come from, because the cover is fantastic, and the publication. Is it again Pitch Publishing that's done it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so basically, the Dutch sort of came to my consciousness because 71, 72, I'd be 15, 14, 15 sort of thing, and that's the sort of era where you sort of see a brand of football. Yeah. We're talking the Huddy seasons, we're talking Osgood seasons. Charlie Cook, that sort of, George Best. These are the seasons. These are the games where you sort of, this is what football's about. You want to see the best players. On formulaic guys and bump up the bloody park. You must see some great football. So I think that's why I sort of got attached to Dutch football. And then because they kept winning, they became legendary. And then you obviously got 74 as well. So that was I just sort of enraptured by Dutch football. So that's where my interest came from. Regarding the cover, there's a guy called, his name's Duncan. I think he's Duncan Only. Forgive me, I'm not quite sure of his surname. He works for Pitch. Yeah. And when you're doing the sort of, the book is with Pitch. And when you're doing the sort of, they ask you, any ideas about the cover? Well, I mean, this will be my third one with Pitch. I said, I think it is, but I tell you what, I'm happy. Whatever Dunk comes up with, they're always brilliant. And it is a great cover. It's Pete Kaiser and the picture. And I've been a few of the guys who have sort of done the books, sort of helped me with the books, and Menel Potter's one of the guys, and the Orc Cock was the one who said, I can't believe you wrote a book about Ajax. It's great to see you didn't put a picture of Cruyff on the front.
Yeah.
Because just going back a couple of things that you mentioned earlier, that Ruud Krol, he came into the team in 1969, so it's 70-71, and would have played the European Cup and broke his leg.
Yeah.
About 3 or 4 months before, so he couldn't play. And back to the sort of what does Nichols do when his fullback breaks his leg? So he put knee skins. He played knee skins, a midfield player as a fullback.
Right.
Yeah. So that was what he worked. And Johnny Rep, he came through the team, and it was always an issue about getting a first team game, because the guy I mentioned earlier, Sharp Spart, had been there for a long, long time, and Cruyff liked playing with Spart. Spart he'd do all the graft and all that sort of thing. And Johnny Rep always said he couldn't get a game ahead of Spart until Cruyff said it was okay. He had to sort of not convince the coach. He had to convince the Cruyff that to let him in. And at this time, this was Kovacs who would be in charge then. But he scored a goal in that game against Juve. It was Juve's first European final, and they were like nervous rabbits caught in the headlights. I was talking to Ruud Krol about this game, and he said that we couldn't believe, because they come from the Netherlands, how hot it was in Belgrade. Yeah. And we couldn't really play our normal game. And it's almost like we played it in third gear. And if you look at the game, there are so many strolling about, and the ball's giving the work, and the ball's pissing about, but the players are sort of walking about. And it's sort of deemed to be, the sort of poorest performance. But there's lots of reasons why that was the case. And the Juve didn't seem to want to come out and play. In fact, Johnny Rep said something like, when we scored, we thought, okay, they've got to come out now, but they never came out. They didn't want to play. They didn't want to fight. They almost were happy just to keep it to 1-0. But, so in a game like that, when the team don't want to, it takes two to tango, Paul, doesn't it? So the other team don't want to play. They're a bit stuck, and, you go 1-0, and they don't seem to fight to want to equalise, and there you go.
But that's the fantastic thing about that Dutch team. They could play you on the front foot, or they could defend on the back foot as well. They could do anything. They had the personnel. You've just referenced there Johan Nijskens, who drops in there at fullback. What did Guardiola do the other week? He put Bernardo Silva there at fullback. Yeah. Jack Grealish almost played as a wing back the other week. So, they look at these football players and they can do a job for me in that position, in this situation, and they're all comfortable to just drop in and do that job in a certain position, whereas some other teams that the players aren't as educated, they're like rabbits in the headlights, aren't they? They don't know what to do. Yeah. They just drop in, and it's second nature to them. That's what Ireland is all about, the Dutch, and also as well, coming from a nation, Gary, that I don't know what the population is now, but back then it was less, and the Dutch have done so magnificently with such a small nation.
Yeah, they had. That's why it was sort of quite a bit of a backwater of European football. I mean, you're absolutely right about the players, mate. Mm-hmm. I mean, the ethos is pick your best players and then put them in the positions. Yeah. But so many Ajax players were used to when they signed Harry Hahn, and the same thing happened when they signed Horst Blankenberg, a German defender who was playing next to Hulshoff. The same thing happened with Vasovic when they signed him. Mikel starts these players in midfield, whether they're defenders or what, so they understand the position, so they can move out with the ball. Centre halves these days, you might have 2 in 10 who are decent footballers who can actually, but they were their best. You pick your best players. Your best players. I mean, it wouldn't have any sort of qualms about playing Neeskins in as a fullback. It just indicates a very great Guardiola. When he was at Barcelona, he turned Mascherano from a midfield player into a central defender.
Mm.
So you pick your best players, and that's what happened with certainly with Mikkels and to an extent with Kovacs, and in the World Cup as well, in '74 as well.
Absolutely, we can't leave the podcast without talking about the Reynolds years, because he was almost like the father of Ajax football again, another Englishman that's put his indelible stamp onto Dutch football, as Jimmy Hogan did back in the early 1900s when Bolton Wanderers, I think it was, went to Holland and smashed them, I think, something like 10-2, one of the sides, and says, one of these days I'll come back and teach you how to play football. So, when you look at the development of Dutch football since the Dutch have played the game of football, there's always been an Englishman, and not just once, but twice, wasn't it, that Reynolds managed Ajax?
Yeah. Just sort of briefly pick up on what you're saying there. Jimmy Hogan is revered in the Netherlands as a coach, and the same is true in Hungary. When Hungary beat England 5-3, 5-2, whatever it was, in 1953, Hungary expected him to be the guest of honour there. And he was there, but he was coaching the Aston Villa youth team at the time, and he was there with the other players. And they said, Faisal, who was the manager, one of the sort of not the manager, the head of the Hungarian FA or something, said when the history of Hungarian football is written, Jimmy Hogan's name will be written in gold. And Sebes, who was the coach, said he taught us how to play football. But he had the same effect. He worked with Hugo Meisel with the Swiss team. Yeah. He actually worked with the Gran Torino team as well. But you mentioned about Jack Reynolds. So Jack Reynolds, for about 25, 30 years, he was in and out of Ajax for a long time. He was in the Second World War. And he ended up in an internment camp when the Netherlands were invaded. And they call this is the guy I spoke to, Menno Pot, who's a real Ajax aficionado. To this day they call Jack Reynolds Uncle Jack. Yeah. Uncle Jack. And when the old stadium, the Demir, they had a stand named after him. And when they moved to the Ajax arena, the A arena, which is now renamed the Johan Cruyff Arena, there's a lobby there named for Jack Reynolds, and there's a plaque on the wall about him. So when you go in, the plaque's right in front of you. That's the respect they have for Jack Reynolds. But there's also another couple of guys who coached Ajax from the UK. And they took a lot of, and this happened with a lot of European clubs, took a lot of British coaches. Yeah. But weren't the coaches who coached the English way of playing. They were the people who coached possession of the football, not just running up and down the terraces to get fit, but they coached with the ball. And Jesse Carver, who I think was managed the baggies for a while as well, but he worked all over Europe. And the other one who was different, didn't manage the baggies for a while, of course, is Vic Buckingham. And it was Vic Buckingham who gave Cruyff his debut.
Yeah, there were so many coaches that didn't fit into the narrative that the English were driving, which Correct. Was, if you didn't see the ball during the week, you'll want the ball at the weekend. Whereas these fellas were going, let's have the ball during the week and the weekend, and we'll perfect the art of using the ball and the possession of it. And, I think there's another great book there of the coaches. the coaches of yesteryear that really transformed and changed the world of football. Bella Gutman would be another one. Bella was very instrumental in the development of Benfica, etc., and one or two others. And there's so many that should never ever be forgotten. How can people hook up with you, Gaz, and buy the book? When's it due out? Have you got on our socials and our groups? I've put it out there, but for people that aren't involved with us and our socials, what's the best way to buy your book? Because that's what you want people to do: buy it and read it. It must be a fabulous read, and I will go out there and buy it like I did with the previous books as well, mate.
Yeah, wonderful, man. So basically, it's not out until 22nd of May.
Yeah.
But it's on Amazon for pre-order at the moment. So you just type in my name, Gary Thacker, Thacker. You'll go there. It's actually, I think it's second rated in the hot new releases on Amazon's European League. So it's obviously selling quite well, which is great. I've also got a Twitter page up for it as well, which is at Dutch Masters 73. We've all got news about the book and about a lot of the people who've contributed to the interviews and about some of the games there to sort of whet people's appetite for the book. And it's not until May, but it's still selling well. So anybody wants to follow me on Twitter, that's great. I always follow people back. That'd be wonderful.
Superb. And these football times, how are the guys going on? You've got so many books. I mean, I've got lots of your books in my library. The European books from Stephen Scragg and Stu as well, doing the 82 and the Brazil of 82. Some fantastic publications you guys come up with and do such wonderful work with these football times. And Aidan as well with his Nearly Men. Brilliant book. I've got that in my library as well.
Yeah, it's great to have. It's like a support network with those guys there. There's a guy called Paul McPartland as well with the book about Everton's Championship, and it's great because we all support each other. And there's some really talented guys. So I feel very privileged to work with some of the guys today. I mean, Steve, for example, has been nominated for the Sports Book of the Year twice. I think Stu's 1982 book. Brazil 1982 was nominated. He's got a really good book coming out soon about the 1982 World Cup, which I think is going to be a blooming barnstormer. So yeah, they're great to work with. They've got podcasts going all over the show at the moment. So yeah, it's great to work with. Supportive guys, really great, talented guys.
Superb. Can you pass on my regards to the guys? And can I wish you all the very best, Gary, with your work? This can't be your last book or your next book, the last book. You must keep on writing books and educating us. Your final words, sir. What would your final word be about this wonderful book? And where did the title come from? I mean, I know it's like what you would call those Dutch people, the masters, but how did you come about that working title?
Well, firstly, thank you for your kind words, Paul. I mean, basically, in the introduction, I compared the players to the famous artists, Dutch masters, Rembrandt, Van Hals, and how they sort of used colours to paint on their canvas, whereas the Ajax Football Club painted on a green canvas, but they still made beautiful pictures. That's the sort of thing. I've got a nice little intro in there. There's a quote from it goes back like 300 years, and something like, in fact, I'll tell you what it is. I'll tell you, because I've got it in front of me. It was a guy called Sir William Temple. He was the English ambassador to the Dutch Republic just after they won the 80 Years' War against Spain. This was 1673, so it's literally exactly 300 years before they won the third European Cup. And it says the Dutch are the envy of some, the fear of others, and the wonder of all their neighbours. And I thought, what a bloody wonderful quote that is. So, I mean, listen to the thought about Ajax of the early 70s, the wonder of all their neighbours, the envy of some, the fear of others, and that captured it wonderfully.
Gary, I don't think we can add anything to that last statement of yours. That just says it all. In terms of football, when you're in a training session and someone scores a worlder, you go, do you know what, we'll finish on that and we're going to finish on that, mate. Can I wish you all the very best? And anytime you need me, I'm only a phone call away. Enjoy the sun in Spain and all the very, very best to you, mate. I'm honoured to cut another podcast with one of my educators. Thank you, sir.
Bless you, buddy, and keep the podcast coming. It's always great to hear about Uddy and TC and Tony Curry and Frank Worthington and the more kind of footballers, buddy.
Absolutely. Cheers, pal. Catch you later.
Okay, cool.
And thanks all for listening. Cheers, Gary. Thank you.
Bye, mate.
Bye for now. Bye-bye.